is the editor of Al-Faghr, a Palestinian newspaper here in Jerusalem. We didn't hear the word Palestinian in tonight's announcement. What does that mean to you?
Well, what is important first is that the whole world should have a sigh of relief that the war is over, that we are going to prepare for a new beginning, and the Palestinian problem stands on its own. It's important, it's been discussed, linkage or no linkage, it's going to be tackled next. We want the same vigor that has been shown and the determination in trying to end the crisis in the Gulf, free Kuwait, return the Iraqis back to their homeland, shown in this area so that the Palestinians too will enjoy freedom and independence and start a new life where also Israel can live in security, because only when the Palestinians have their independence, Israel can also feel secure.
Okay. Mr. Hana Senor, who is editor of Al-Faghr magazine, and Galia Golan of the Hebrew University here in Jerusalem, we appreciate you shedding some light on this very interesting development here today, and more to come. Greg Lefebvre, CNN, reporting live from Jerusalem.
All right, in case you just joined us, or in case you have forgotten momentarily, here are some of the points that were proposed by Baghdad when it reacted positively to the Soviet peace plan to end the war in the Gulf. The first point is that Iraq would withdraw from Kuwait unconditionally, that withdrawal would begin the second day after the cessation of hostilities. The third point is that it would take place over a fixed time frame. We don't know what that time frame is yet, of course. And the fourth point is that when 2/3 of the Iraqi troops are out, the economic sanctions imposed by the UN would cease.
And additional 4 points, starting, of course, with the fifth. After the Iraqi withdrawal, the cause for the Security Council sanctions would cease. Therefore, those sanctions by the Security Council would cease to exist. Number 6, after the ceasefire, all POWs would be immediately released. Number 7, the withdrawal of Iraq would be monitored by the UN Security Council. And 8, of course, there are details yet to be determined. Those would be released publicly on February 22nd, first, of course, to the members of the Security Council.
Our full live coverage, of course, of the war in the Gulf continues at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. I want to remind you that Moneyline is next. However, if any developments should break out, we, of course, will interrupt. I'm Ralph Holmes.
Clearly, the ball is now in the White House court. Is this enough to bring about a ceasefire, and does it mean an almost certain halt in plans for the U.S. ground war, which was said to be only hours away from now? Michael?
Our guests are Christopher Hitchens, author and columnist for The Nation magazine, America's best-known left-wing weekly, and Senator John McCain, Republican of Arizona, member of the Armed Services Committee. Senator McCain, the CNN Gallup poll by coincidence came out today. 71% of Americans say that if Saddam Hussein agrees to pull out of Kuwait, let's call off the war. He has now agreed to pull out of Kuwait. Are 71% of Americans right or wrong?
I think that always with a poll, Michael, it depends on how the question's asked.
Answer it the way I asked.
I think that 71% of the American people are right without conditions, and clearly there are conditions. But let me emphasize that this is a major step forward and is significant and should be examined by the White House, even though clearly the present proposal, particularly as regards to reparations for Kuwait, 1/3 out left at one time and all that, is not in keeping with the UN resolution.
So what it comes down to with these details is, do you want to try to negotiate them away, or do you want to use them as an excuse to torpedo the whole deal and have a land war?
Or are you in danger of, as we were in the Korean War and again in the Vietnam War, agreeing on something in principle and spending a few years haggling over the details?
Chris Hitchens, we're getting reports that the President, of course, is in the White House. He's meeting with Secretary Baker. Quayle is on the way. There's a top-level meeting right now. Does this not mean, if what we get out of Moscow is valid, that they're getting out the right conditions, that the United States has won the war?
No, it doesn't, because the objective of the war is not the recovery of Kuwait. I mean, here's a free gift being offered to you for the third time. The Algerians offered it, the Iraqis themselves offered it. It was all the time turned down. Wonderful to have Kuwait retrieved in the international community and no war, but that is not the point. The point is the United States wants to appoint itself the government of Iraq, and the guarantor of Saudi Arabia in the Gulf. And the stated purpose of the war is the destruction and replacement of the Iraqi government. That's to say, if the White House tries to laugh this off, which it will be harder to do than it was in the Algerian case, but already we're getting very ungraceful noises from the White House, it will be because this is not their objective. They've repeatedly stated the objective is to appoint themselves
most of us assume here that the primary objective, and for which the president has taken this country into war, is to get the Iraqi army out of Kuwait without conditions. It appears he's not only going to get that, but he will have successfully destroyed or damaged irreparably the Iraqi war machine. It seems to me, if the Iraqi army gets out of Kuwait unconditionally, President Bush can claim total victory.
If he wanted these things, he could have had them without killing anybody several months ago. A deliberate attempt was made to torpedo every effort to confine it to the question of Kuwait. It isn't the question. Anyone who thinks the United States has gone to war for plucky little Kuwait is already.
Why do you suppose, Mr. President, the Iraqis are so clear? Not be clear. They're 15.
Look up to Dr. Brzezinski pointing out the same thing to the Algerian agreement. There's a total evacuation of Kuwait by Iraq in exchange for no attack upon Iraq itself. The war aim is an attack upon Iraq. Don't you understand?
Senator McCain, not everyone agrees with Pat that a ceasefire and end of the war at this point would in fact be a success for President Bush, and there's a lot of mystery about whether President Bush thinks that or not. So let me ask you, clearing away all these questions about the lingering ceasefire as in Vietnam, suppose we can get the ceasefire, but we don't get him off his perch. He's still there. He withdraws. He leaves some of his equipment behind, not all of it. In other words, a deal. Do we take it or do we not take it?
If under the parameters you're talking about, I think we take it. And despite what Mr. Hitchens says, that has been our goal all along. That's what the Congress voted for. That's what I voted for. And I think you even supported Michael. And let me just add one other thing. I think that one thing, and Wrinkle, it's interesting here. Saddam Hussein could talk to his people earlier today over nationwide radio. Why does it have to be a Soviet spokesman that's saying this? Why couldn't Aziz say it at least, or Saddam Hussein?
These are negotiations. You know how negotiations work.
Somebody should be speaking for their government as to what their government...
Are you going to have a war? Are you going to let thousands of people die over whether this comes over the radio from Baghdad or from Moscow?
It's an interesting aspect of it.
Even what do you notice there, Michael? Saddam Hussein commented on it after President Bush had commented on it and said it wasn't good enough without revealing its terms and conditions.
Well, let's talk about it right now, what we heard out of Moscow. Both of you, do you agree or not agree that a ground war now, in the next 24 hours, has become terribly unlikely, if not politically impossible?
I think so. And what I would do if I were President Bush, I'd say, okay, this is a good beginning. Now, are you going to do A, B, C, D, and E? And we want to know it in 24 hours, otherwise the ground war starts.
You're a very strong supporter of the president and everything he's done, and you're saying if you'd sat and told the president, in that meeting right now, you would say, Mr. President, we cannot go ahead with the ground war right now. We have to look at this.
I would give him 24 or 48 hours, and they have plenty of time to respond. Do you mean that you are going to pay reparations to Kuwait? Do you mean that you will accept inspection and monitoring of your weapons of mass destruction, etc.? And you are unconditionally leaving Kuwait, which is not part of that 8-point proposal.
Point 2 is unconditional. John McCain, you wouldn't send American Marines and troops into battle over reparations.
No, I would not. But I would also make sure that they was absolutely clear all of the aspects of it and not a set of conditions imposed by the Iraqis.
What do you think is going to happen, Chris Hitchens?
I don't think that the United States went through all this trouble in order to make itself the master of the Persian Gulf, and in the words of the President the other day, to show that what we say goes, which is the purpose of the war, of course, unless you believe in plucky Kuwait, in which case you probably believe in plucky little Belgium and the rescue of Cuba from the Spanish Empire and various other good things. They didn't do that in order to give the Soviet Union the credit for making the peace. And I think that's what's, they're going to go, I think, on sniffing at this as it was the most unwelcome package they could possibly.
You think that's going to be a great war?
They do not want peace, they want domination. Unfortunately, you can't have domination without fighting.
We all want
killing sword. They've already killed after the Algerian offer, thousands of Iraqis. thousands of it. They went through all the trouble of sabotaging the Algerian offer. There were thousands of people not to get to this point.
The Algerian offer was not worth the powder to blow it to where the rest of those Iraqis have gone. We all know that. This is significantly different. The Algerians this is significantly different. This is dramatically different than any proposal we've seen before. Because in the Algerian offer, even the withdrawal was not used. But it is true. It is true. The White House does keep saying, we don't have any White House reaction yet to this one, but in every earlier little sniff, as Mr. Hitchens put it, Fitzwater comes out and says he's disappointed. They're not really disappointed. They're actually delighted. I don't think so, Michael. I think they want an unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait, and I have to take them at their word. And I see no reason why we do that. That's what I to say. Yes, did I take people elected to take the government at its word? Why shouldn't I take it? Every action that he's made so far has been correct, and he has been including me and the American people.
Including to tell Saddam Hussein that we have no opinion on Israel border dispute?
That is an old saw that we have worked over for a long, long time. It obviously did not affect Saddam Hussein's motivation to invade Kuwait, as we all know.
He needs a senator. Just send me your postcard. I back the president. And it's pathetic.
We went through 3 days of debate.
Thousands of people have died to show that evacuation of Kuwait was not enough for George Bush and Dan Quayle. I think it's only right to be extremely doubtful.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to ask this big Brzezinski question, which is, how much blood of Americans should be paid to achieve aims beyond what Saddam Hussein is offering?
Ground combat is tough proposal.
That proposal includes what it calls unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait, but it also has terms President Bush might find unacceptable, such as a ceasefire before the withdrawal starts. Is peace at hand? We're talking with Christopher Hitchens, columnist for The Nation and author of several books, and Senator John McCain, Republican of Arizona, member of the Armed Services Committee, and a former POW in Vietnam. Senator McCain, I want to ask you the Brzezinski question, because it was a question he posed here. We were talking about the possibility of what has now been realized, the nightmare scenario, so-called. How many Americans should have to die to achieve goals beyond what Saddam Hussein is offering?
Again, Michael, it depends on what these conditions mean. I think they can be clarified in a very short period of time. And I also think that we ought to be a little bit skeptical when there is an imminent ground operation which Saddam Hussein knows at this particular moment in time. But I think we have time to take a pause, examine these proposals, see if they're really sincere, see what the Iraqi government says. So far, it's been through the Soviet government, as you know. But clearly, I would accept if they are truly without conditions.
What about this issue of how many weapons he has to leave behind? Are we going to have a war over whether he has to march out without his weapons or whether he can take his weapons with him? Is that worth having a war over?
No, I don't. And I also feel that after sustaining this kind of defeat, Saddam Hussein will not be kept in power by his own people.
All right, Christopher Hitchens. Last Friday, of course, Saddam Hussein said he would accept withdrawal UN Resolution 660, and then we had a lot of conditions to it. Maybe it was the same deal we're talking about in Moscow today. But that was 5 weeks after the war had begun. Now, does this not suggest that Saddam Hussein's will to fight, if you will, and resist, has been broken as a direct consequence of the American air war launched by George Bush? Again, without getting into your Algerian answer, has not the United States, in effect, won this war with air power?
I knew you'd want it to be peace through strength, Mr. Buchanan. Naturally, it would be better than no peace at all. But I return you to the point, and I find myself with Dr. Brzezinski about as often as Senator McCain finds himself with Amnesty International, which he did in the debate, when, by the way, if you recall, the job in hand was toppling Hitler from his throne, something that apparently isn't included in this package. Now, I believe this. I believe that President Bush will do many stupid things in order to avoid looking stupid. He has said this is a fight against Hitlerism. He's put his entire credibility on knocking Saddam Hussein off his perch. He's trying to show what we say goes. America is the only superpower. It will control the resources and governments of the Gulf and the Middle East. He's not going to all this trouble to make Gorbachev look like an honest broker. So I'm very worried at the very first reactions we're getting from the White House. All of them, we don't like the look of this. Saddam Hussein has not promised to stand on his head. As to this world and
Let me follow up on what you're saying. You're saying that President Bush is going to find a way to reject this and continue to prosecute the war, in which case there will be a major breach between Gorbachev and the president, correct?
Yes, I think that's true.
Do you think that's
I
correct?
don't think so. I think what the president is going to do, as we say, he's going to say, okay, let's give him 24 hours. Tomorrow they say the details are forthcoming. Are they going to be in compliance with the UN mandate or not? And we will be able to make a clear determination in a very short period of time. And let me say, Michael, again, no, I don't think President Bush is willing to risk American lives unnecessarily.
Let me talk about reparations now. Look, Iraq is smashed. It's $80 billion in debt before it was smashed. If you're going to get reparations, you're talking about getting them from the Iraqi people, basically. Saddam Hussein doesn't have a big bank account. So are we going to fight over squeezing